Hi, wonderful people. I'm Leah Rapaner. As a sociologist, University of Melbourne professor, founder of the Gender Equity Initiative, director of the Future of Work Lab, woman, wife, and mother, I've made it my life's mission to take down every ridiculous gender myth out there. Together, we'll deep dive into the research to get to the bottom of all these misperceptions that are holding all of us back. Don't worry, I've studied these types of questions for decades, and after publishing countless articles exactly on these topics, I know when they are nonsense or real truths. And I'm going to help you learn that too. So here we go. Let's do it. This is Misperceived. On today's episode, I'm going to walk you through, is it a misperception that women have an evolutionary pull to nest before a baby is born? There is this argument that right before a baby comes in the third trimester, that women get this nesting instinct. And the argument is this is just evolutionary, or this is some result of a hormonally driven pull that means that you all of a sudden at some moment wake up and need to intensely clean, you tidy your space, you're getting your everything ready, you're buying the stuff, you're doing everything for the baby to come. And this question is this pull or this desire to nest really actually true? Do mothers have this hormonally driven nesting phase right before the birth of the baby? What happened for you if you've had a baby? Did you nest right before? And I want to know, did you nest with your first child the same way you nested with your second? And if you had a third or a fourth or a fifth, did it look the same? Because maybe with the first it was more, and by the second it was little, and by the third you just didn't care. That baby popped out wherever you were, as you were, in whatever shape the house was in. So did you actually nest? Did you witness this? Did you see it happen? And did you see it happen with others? I'm going to tell you a little bit about what happened for me. So I was 30 years old. I had my first job. I was working at the University of Hawaii Hilo, beautiful spot. And we had very little money, and we were having this baby quite unexpectedly, even though I was 30 years old with a mortgage, a marriage, and a career. And so we were trying to figure out how we were going to do it, in part because kids are expensive and that first moment is really expensive. And so what we did was pretty much nothing. I didn't take any classes. I did no birthing classes. I just showed up. I didn't really buy anything until probably the end, when we went around to different yard sales and bought whatever was on offer at that moment in time. And then right before the baby came, we kind of got everything set up, and I don't really remember nesting. I remember kind of thinking, oh, I'm going to eventually have this pull to nest. But what I really remember was working, stressing, and then doing a lot of jigsaw puzzles because I was bored. There's that period of time right before the baby comes. I think anyone who's had a baby knows it. You're bored. You're uncomfortable. You think you're going to be like luxuriating. You think you're going to have your feet up. People tell you, just relax. It's so great right before the baby comes. It is awful. It's the most awful experience. You are ready for that child to be out. You're counting down the minutes, and people are there like, isn't this wonderful? And all you want to do is just close the door and yell and run away. At least that's how I felt. Did you feel that way? Because I'm feeling very vulnerable right now. And was this your experience, or am I a terrible person? Okay, back to the research. So, is it in fact a misperception that women have this evolutionary pull to nest before the baby is born? Now, let me tell you about the research from Ariane Chavisi at the Brighton and Sussex Medical School in Women's Studies International Forum. So, in this article, Ariane conducts a research project to look at nesting in two ways. First, she's interested in how nesting is presented on parenting websites, on the kind of medias that parents might read online, to see on those top parenting websites, do they actually talk about nesting, right? Like, how are they talking about it? And do they talk about it in an evolutionary way? And what she finds is that this is really mixed. The way in which parenting websites talk about that period of time right before the birth and the preparation is mixed. Some describe it as being driven by hormones, but others are not explicit, and some are a little bit balanced, saying things like, well, it could be hormones, but it could also be socialization, and it could be just the need to get things ready. So across these sites, there is some evidence that there is this expectation normatively that we nest, but the science isn't really bearing it out. And she isn't finding kind of a consistent argument. So then what she does is she looks at the academic journals. What does the science show? Is there any evidence that mothers nest right before the birth of the child. And what she finds is that there's a lot of animal studies. There's a lot of animal studies about pigs, about mice, about bunnies, maybe even a little bit about bears that talk about how these animals nest right before the birth of a child. She makes the point that we are not mice, that we are not, in fact, pigs, nor bears, nor rabbits, and we are not living in the wilderness. And so, therefore, they may nest because, yes, they want to give birth someplace that's warm, comfortable, and safe. But we don't live in those worlds. So, we don't need to create this kind of comfy and warm space. You have it, right? Because we live in modern accommodation. And let me be clear, like, I bet you that freaking mouse would come give birth in your bed if they were let to. So let me be clear, they would probably stop nesting as well if they could live in your comfy, warm home. But her point is that we are mammals, but we are not like these animals. So let's stop saying that we nest because a pig nests right before birth. And I think that's a fair point. Then she goes through the research where there's a handful of studies that look at the cleaning habits of people who answered surveys, say off a parenting website during their third trimester, or undergraduates who are tracking their menstrual cycles and their cleaning habits. And from this research coming in the 1990s, they're saying there's some evidence that there is an increase in cleaning when women are in that follicle stage, that kind of ovulation stage, and that results in, that's a suggestion that there's hormonally driven cleanliness. Now, Ariane Chavisi argues, like, wait a minute. This is a small sample, 25, maybe 30. It's coming from the 1990s. And are we really basing our expectations of pregnant mothers' nesting habits on a study of 25 undergraduates who are managing complex lives in dormitories? They're up all night. So what this existing evidence shows is it's largely about rats and pigs, or it's about undergraduate women from the 1990s. And so there's really no evidence of a biological urge to nest. So is this a misperception? And the answer is yes. This is just, there's no science behind it. But of course, mothers often do a huge amount of cleaning and organizing right before a baby is born. So how do we explain that, right? Like, there is this tendency to do this. And what I'm going to do is give you some answers, a couple of answers on why maybe women do this. Number one, someone has to do this work, and it usually falls to women. Why? Because we expect women to do it. We socialize women into cleanliness. We socialize women and say, motherhood is this really important part of your identity and your social role, and it is. But those two things come together, and someone has to prepare for the baby, and so moms do it. The work falls to mom because we expect mothers to do it. Number two, it's possible that women are just super anxious before the birth of their child. They are anticipating the birth of a child, and that can be really nerve-wracking. So maybe one way to exhibit control is to clean and to organize. And since we expect women to be in control of the cleaning and the organizing, this makes sense that they would step into the role. So what I want you to see is point 2 and point 1 are connected. The third thing is there's just an urgency. Like, the baby's coming. Like, I don't know what to say. Like, you have to do it, and you might feel this urgency. The work has to be done. And maybe many families wait a long time to do this work, in part because pregnancy can be unstable, and you want to make sure that you're really having this baby at the end. And so maybe people push it and push it and push it until, the baby's coming. The fourth reason is that women often take off work right before the birth of the child. They might take a week or two off in anticipation of the birth. And so all of a sudden they have the time to do the work. It's not an urge to clean. It's just they're no longer 8 hours a day at work. 5, Capitalism benefits from you buying a lot of stuff right before the birth of a child. Now, I don't know how many of you follow, say, social media accounts of beautiful nurseries that are just glistening. They have the diaper genie, they have the heated milk bottles, they have the vibrating crib, they have the cameras watching the baby. I can't think of all the things, but you could have all the things. And if you tell women that actually this is the type of room your special, wonderful baby should be born into, then you're going to buy a lot of stuff and you're going to nest a lot and you're going to make sure that you're giving your child that perfect room. Now, let me give you a number 6. Some women love this work, and that is great. If this is something that you're doing in preparation for the birth of your child and you have the gift of organization and it makes you feel excited and happy and joyful, wonderful. So if doing this work makes you feel good, then that's okay. But understand, for those of you who don't like doing this work, or maybe who would want your partner to participate in it, if you're doing it just because you think women nest and that is their biological urge, it's not true. And so you can construct your transition into parenthood any way you want. And that's a fact. So, is it a misperception that women are prone to nest because of some hormones or because of some evolutionary pull? Absolutely. This is work that has to be done. Someone has to do it. And it usually is women. But what that means is if you know that this is a myth, you can decide whether you participate in it. You can do it your own way. There's no wrong way to do this. And so don't get tricked into thinking that there's only one way to do it. You can do it exactly as you wish. And that is my wish for you. As per usual, thank you so much for listening to Misperceived, where you don't need a PhD, you just get to come hang out with me. This podcast was produced with the support of the incredible Sophie Squires, the wonderful Kate Danger, the fantastic Rich Berner, and the one and only, the best ever made, Serena Reagan. I would like to acknowledge that our podcast is recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people listening today.